It's going to take a minute, right? Nobody reads anything anymore. So the computer decided to stop working.
While Mark is doing that, any questions for any of the folks who've come so far? Carl or Saab or? Fine, much. Meeting live.
So it's easy to wire up external non-AWS data sources to the AWS marketplace instances. Briefly about how we are using Jaspersoft, why we're using Jaspersoft, just kind of what we've gone through. So I'm Mark, I'm from Illuninate Education. We are a company that we specialize in the K-12 education segment, so the kindergarten through 12th grade. Basically what we do is we have a data and assessment management system that we install for school districts. So I'm going to talk through kind of who we are, why we're doing what we're doing, the problem that we had, what we were facing before we jumped in with Jaspersoft, why we chose Jaspersoft, and just kind of jump through our specific instance and how we deployed it and what it looks like in our app. So at the end, I'll be jumping in and actually going into the application, showing you some of the reports and how we've embedded the BI. So a little background and overview of K-12 as an industry. It's kind of an interesting place to work because there are some significant financial hurdles. Everybody's always talking about budget issues in K-12 education. That leads to staffing issues. It leads to a lack of updated technology. We've had some really significant struggles where we just were able to stop supporting Internet Explorer 7 because that's just what technology is like in education. They're not buying new computers. Everybody's using old dinosaur machines still. And so there are some technical challenges. We're also facing issues where a lot of school districts don't have a robust IT staff. Some do. Your larger school districts might, but a lot of them don't. They just don't have the staff. They're not extremely data aware. They don't have the resources to deploy even databases. You know, we deal with access databases a lot still. So it's just kind of an interesting place to live. One of the other really significant challenges in education is that there's been this really big focus lately on accountability. And some of you guys have probably heard about this Common Core and state standards and changing standards and national standards. Education is rapidly evolving. President Bush brought in NCLB, which was No Child Left Behind. That's kind of potentially going away. Now you've got all these Common Core standards. And so the landscape is rapidly shifting. With that, there's just this increased need for accountability. So everybody wants to know what's going on, where are we at, how are our students performing? Because ultimately one of the most interesting things about the accountability model is that if schools are not performing, the state now has, in some states, has the authority to come and kind of take that school over. Schools will get placed into program improvement if they don't do well enough, and if they don't actually improve, the district loses that school. So there are some financial issues there. So just accountability and visibility into data is an increasingly important issue in education. So some of the, again, going through some of the issues, because there's no staff to do some of the more technical things, schools are looking outside vendors. One of the biggest issues we run into constantly is that there are many solutions that just add to the data problem. So if you look at this, you've got a student information system, right, which is basically that's where your grades, your schedule, your student demographics are stored, your assessments, how your kids are scoring on specific tests that they're taking, your special ed data for kids with special needs, they have individualized education plans, attendance systems, portals, there's all these different pieces. What winds up happening is that these vendors will pop up and they just specialize in the grade book. And so all we do is we make this really cool grade book and it's awesome and teachers are going to love it. And one of the big challenges that introduces is that that's just a grade book and it's sitting there disconnected from every other piece of data in the school district. And so a new kid comes rolling into school tomorrow, that student doesn't show up in the teacher's grade book, they have to put that data into the grade book manually. Well, then the teachers are adding a bunch of grades into their grade book, but that data is disconnected from some state assessment data that the district just loaded into some other system. So the systems rarely talk to each other. APIs are kind of a foreign concept in the education world.
They're just now starting to catch on, but people, there's just, data exchange is always a problem. So, Illuminate Education addressed it, that's what we do. So our solution is that our dream, kind of what we talk to folks about, is that we're in all the data system. We have the student information system, the data and assessment management system, the gradebook. We have all of those components all built on one platform. It's modular, so we can walk into a school district and say, hey, if you just need the data and assessment piece, use the data and assessment piece. And then we do such a good job with it, they like it so much, hopefully that leads to them switching over and using more and more of those modules, because folks are starting to understand the importance of having all of that data connected and talking to each other for a reporting perspective. So that's kind of why we do what we do. Currently, we're in 25 states. We've got over 137,000 users. And so for us, a user would be anybody that's logging into our software. So typically, that's going to be teachers and administrators inside of school districts. We're in over 5,300 schools nationally, over 550 school districts, and we've got more than 2.2 million students in our databases combined. So that's active students. A district student count, it's going to be anywhere, when we talk about a district, it's anywhere from 200 kids. So it's a really small little district with 200 students, all the way up to a big district with 120,000 students. So when we're talking about a school district, each one of our installations, each district has its own database. So some of our databases that are lightning fast, because it's just got 200 kids in it. Others, we've got to make sure that it scales up to 120,000 kids. And then typically for us, we've got around 1,500 concurrent users. So at any point of the 137,000, 1,500 are on the system all at the same time, just kind of using the system across everything. So this was the problem we're running into. Because we're building these reports and we're pushing information out, we're trying to pull all this data together for educators to use. One of our big challenges is that our user base is not very sophisticated when it comes to data analysis. That's just the reality of where we're at. You know, we're dealing with educators who went to school to get a liberal arts degree, not people who have degrees in statistics and computer science. And so the audience is very, very different. So we've got to make sure that we're building reports that make sense, that work, that scale. Prior to Jaspersoft, every report that we would build was hand-coded by a developer. So we'd have a guy just sit down and write the report, deploy the report. That creates some problems, right? Because those reports are then difficult to add customization because we have one code base. We don't put custom applications out there. You saw we've got over 550 school districts that we're working with. We don't have 550 individual customized applications. We have one app and they're all using the same code base. So when School District X says, hey, I love this report, but we'd love the color to be purple instead of red, we can't make that change without putting all kinds of configurations into the system to account for that. Time to market, it would take us around 4 to 6 weeks just to churn out new reports because we're dealing with, again, introducing these reports into our code base, making sure everything makes sense, making sure we've got pretty good spec'd out reports and accounting for all these, the nuanced differences from one district to the next. It required a developer. You know, one of the challenges is that it was resource intensive. The people that were building our reports were actually our developers. And so just, it didn't make sense. Lack of timeliness, highly technical clients could not deploy reports. I talked about that staffing issue. Well, I think it's the exception, not the rule. There are a lot of districts that actually have pretty technical staff that can put some reports out there. It's not all over the place. It's probably less than 10% of the school districts that we work with. But if you're talking about 500 districts, that's 50 users who could potentially be deploying their own reports. But because everything is code-based for us, they couldn't do that. So we couldn't even leverage we couldn't crowdsource reports essentially. And then our library was static. It was just always the same thing until we added more to it. So what we needed was a better reporting solution. We looked for something that would get us more agile report development, that we could actually have people who could write reports, report writers, not developers building reports, and get people that specialize in reports and data and visualization, not necessarily developers. Because I don't know how you guys work with developers. Just kidding. You get my point. We always ask the guys, whenever we do interviews for new developers, one of the things we ask is like, so what do you specialize in? None of them know how to design. You know, it's very rare to find a developer who has a really, really good eye for design, and that's really separate, and especially when you start getting into report writing. You know, so us leveraging developers for report design, it wasn't making sense. And then I think the most important thing for us is, could we actually deploy reports in a week? Going from 4 to 6 weeks, could we get down to doing a whole report in a week? Could we do it in a day? Could we deploy a brand new report in 1 hour? So these were the things that we were thinking about. about as we started looking around. So we found Jaspersoft. We love open source. We're all about open source. We make money on our software. We're not all open source, but we use a lot of open source technologies, and we just kind of like that concept. We actually can, with Jaspersoft, we can deploy reports in an hour. We don't like to tell everybody that because then they get this expectation that we can just turn out reports every hour, but technically, our report writers can deploy a brand new report from scratch in 1 hour, or less, kind of depending on what they're doing. Support and professional services has been really good for us. And then I think one of the kickers for us is that clients can build reports. So for that 10% population that we deal with, we can actually get school districts with technical personnel who can write queries and design reports. They can connect right into the data source. They can design reports in iReport, and then they can publish those reports. And so the school districts are able to actually turn out their own reports where they've got that staff that can do that. So really, Jaspersoft really answered a lot of questions for us, and it allowed us to be a lot more agile in report development and really expand where our report library would come from. So instead of us having to rely on just 2 report writers in our office, we can rely on the 2 report writers in our office and 50 districts that actually have the staff to start churning out reports. So it kind of expanded that quite a bit. So a little bit about what we do. Our application is 100% web-based. We're using open source. It's a lab stack. Linux, Apache, Postgres is our database, and PHP is the application is written in. Every day, we have distributed databases. And so basically every single client of ours gets their own database. So we sign on a new school district, they get deployed as a brand new database, but that schema is exactly the same for us. And so it makes a lot of sense. We can basically build one report with one query, change the data source, and the report just serves up their data instead of the other district's data. And we're currently running Jasper Server 5.2. We're testing, 5.2, testing 5.5, I was supposed to say. So we're starting to test 5.5, so we can move up to that. And iReport. One of the really, I think, and I don't know how unique this is, but in our case, we don't have any ad hoc reports. So the stuff we were seeing earlier where you can drag things and drop things and slice and dice the data, we're not doing any of that. Basically, we're just deploying what we refer to as pre-built reports. We have input controls, so a classroom teacher can pull up a report, an administrator can pull up a report, answer 6 questions. I want to see this for my English learner population, who are Hispanic and Asian, and then generate the report, and it kind of drives that report up for them. So they have a lot of input controls into the reports, but they're not actually building their own as they go. End users have no access to Jasper, so no one's logging into the Jasper server. Everything is 100% embedded. You guys will see that in a second. And really, there's zero visibility into Jaspersoft at all. Nobody kind of knows it's there. It just sits entirely behind the scenes. So our Jasper server repository, the way we set this up, is basically, I was talking about how we deploy everybody with their own database. Because everybody has their own database, that creates a requirement for us that everybody has to have their own data source. I can't have everybody pointing to the same data source because the database is different for everyone. So every single district that we bring on, they wind up being their own organization with a unique data source. We have a reports directory, and then our reports directory, it links out basically to some public files. So what that allows us to do is that I can build one report, put it in this public place, reference it in the client's report directory, and we still are able to just make one change at one time, and everybody pulls those changes in as we're adjusting reports. Additionally, each district having their own reports directory, that's how they're able to actually go and build their own reports. Because it's not going to clutter up the repository, it's not going to put anything anywhere else except for specifically in their installation. So it allows us to kind of silo a school district so they can kind of do their own thing. If the school district says, I really want that color to be purple instead of red, we can now make that change really easily. I just take the report that they're pointing at, redeploy it into their directory, make a quick tweak, and that takes us 20 minutes, not 20 hours or however much time it would take to get a developer to write configurations to make all of those adjustments. So it allows us to be a lot more flexible there. All reports are executed via the web app, via web service requests. So everything's connecting back in via some SOAP services where we're trying to get away from SOAP. We still have some of that in there, we just haven't gotten it out. And we're using the REST API version 1. We have version 2 ready to go, we don't feel like we've tested it enough to make sure. So this is what we used to do. This is our old and busted process. basically, using the SOAP API, you notice we've got the Illuminate database, the Illuminate application, the SOAP API, and the Jasper server. One of the things that we would do is every time somebody would request a report from the data, from our API, would connect into our database, authenticate some things, and then from there jump out to the API, go back to the Jasper server, then go back to the application. And then the very next click would kind of go that same cycle. The next click would go through that same cycle. So as a teacher, when I'm building a report, I'm saying, I want to see this data for math. Then it says, okay, well, if you want math, what class? Do you want your algebra class or your calculus class? Each one of those wound up being one trip through the whole entire process. And so it worked, and it worked fine. It was just slow, and it wasn't as good as we needed it to be as we started to scale up. So we've done a lot of just kind of learning just through use. I think one of our biggest challenges, and this is just in general for I think just us and a lot of organizations, is that we don't know what we don't know until it's time to know it. So we're wondering, man, why are all these reports so slow? We're getting slammed, and then you realize, oh, maybe this architecture isn't quite the right setup for us. But it always works, so we're always just kind of moving as fast as we can and keeping up. So a few things about it. This was just kind of taxing. Everything's going through this whole cycle. Everything's taking a longer time because every single step along the way, we're hitting all the servers, the database, and back. So one of the things we did is we changed things up. And just using the API, we started making just one call. We figured out ways, just leveraging the API, how can we just make one call to Jasper server and get all of the data. This was working really well for us, except for one additional issue that we ran into. The application server was sitting there waiting for Jasper server to serve up the report. As Jasper server, as the report server is serving up the report, it's executing, it's doing what it's doing, and the server is scaling beautifully. But what's starting to happen is that we're hitting it so much, it's got 50 reports, it's got 100 reports that it's trying to serve up, then our Apache connections are getting all used up. And so then our web server isn't working anymore. So what we did for that is that we identified we probably needed some background job that isn't on the server, the web server. Apache isn't waiting for a connection anymore. We've got a background job that just sends the job and just, our server is just checking, hey, is this thing finished, is this thing finished? So it's kind of a way to load balance what's hitting Jasper. And our application not have to wait for the server necessarily, we just wait for this background report job. So it streamlined things a lot for us. So when I show you guys some of the numbers, we were generating over 400,000 requests within a month for specific reports, and the server just keeps on cranking it out. We've identified that typically when the server doesn't do so well, it's because our reports weren't built very well. It's usually something that we've done in the reports that's slowing things down. So this is our usage. These are our usage statistics. I got this just looking at our Google Analytics. Basically what you see here is that the short bar is the unique page request, the bigger bar is the non-unique page request. So as folks are kind of executing the reports and coming back and cycling through it. But you can see in August of 2013, we worked in school districts, and so the school year starts pretty much in mid-August. That's when we just got slammed because everybody comes into school, they start looking at all their new data. We served up 102,000 just in the month of August, 102,000 unique page requests, 456,000 page requests, just for the page that we have that serves up the reports. So we know that it's working, we know that it's working well, and this is one of those things where when we start looking at the data, we realize, man, this is working a lot better than we thought it was, because we didn't realize we're serving up 500,000 reports in 1 month. So it's been scaling really well for us. So page views, counting repeat page views, 35,000 is the low end. December is usually our slowest month, just because I think everybody's getting in Christmas mode and they're kind of taking a break. Then 456,000 in August. We average about 181,000 total page views per month. So we're getting a lot of traffic. We're really taxing the servers and we're using it a lot. It continues to perform. So let me jump in. I'm going to show you guys the repository, just kind of how that repository is structured. Log in with it. So this is our repository setup. This will just show you when I go in and take a look at our repository. This is, I think, the interesting part around how we've got so many organizations built into it. This is just running on the one server. So when I expand our organizations, you'll see that for every one of our districts, we've got a separate organization. So we have we have a long list of organizations. And then within each one of those organizations, let me find our demo site here. Within each one of those organizations, we have a few different folders. So you'll see that we've got the data sources, and this is where this organization's unique data source resides, saying connect here specifically on to this server in this database. And then we've got this reports folder. And inside the reports folder is where we basically deploy all of the reports, but these reports are pointing to a different JRXML folder. So when I come down here to our public stuff, we've got this reports directory. And in this reports directory is where we actually put all the JRXML. So it gives us the ability to just make edits to reports in one place. And then everything else will just kind of point an alias pointing back to these JRXML files. So I don't know how typical this is, but it works for us. You know, it's one of those things we're just kind of playing with it, figuring out how to best use this. This is what we started doing, and it's been working and scaling. So we're kind of leaving well enough alone. Let me jump in now, and I will actually show you guys some stuff inside of the application. So I'll jump through 4 reports. I'm just going to kind of blow through these. I don't need to bore you guys with the details of the reports themselves, but assuming this works. All right, so this is the application. All right, so I'm logging into a school district as a school district admin, so I'm like a superintendent or a district administrator. I've got access to all of the schools in my entire school district, or I can just log in at the district level. And this will determine what students I have access to, what type of data I'm going to be looking at. So I'll go ahead and log in. This is just going to throw me right into the report that we built. So here, these are our input controls. And one of the things that's interesting about how we set this up is that initially when we first built these reports, we were actually calling out to the Jasper server to say what input controls are available. And we were leveraging cascading input controls. And it was just taking longer than we wanted it to, because as you can see in this report, there's a lot of input controls. You know, we've got 12 or 13 different things that you can ask, and depending on the report, some of those things are changing. So one of the things that we discovered is that it made more sense for us to write a code object to handle all of the input controls. And so rather than us going input control, and always referencing the Jasper server and coming back, we wrote this in our own code object. And we said, these are all the input controls. So we built our own, essentially, input control library. And so it's code-based, and we just reference that. And then by the time I get down to click view in browser, I'm just sending an XML payload back over to the Jasper server so that it knows how to generate the report. So it's a little bit different in how we did this, but this just made the most sense for us and how we needed to use this. So when I build this report, I am looking at CST cluster scores. How many of you guys have kids that have taken the STAR test? Anybody? Okay, so that's what this is. CST is the California Standards Test. This is our demo site, so you're not seeing anything you're not allowed to see. But what I can do here is, this is a site report. So I can go in here and say, for this most recent testing year, look at all of the data from math across, in my school district, look across Algebra 1. So algebra can be taken in 8th grade, maybe 9th grade, and so then go ahead and view this in the browser. So I'm going to look across the whole entire school district. When this says your report is being generated, what that was actually doing is that was that background process checker. And so I click go, it tells the background process, swamp process. And while you get that status bar, our server is basically saying, hey, is this job done yet? Is this job done yet? And it's just constantly checking that like every 2 seconds. And then as soon as it's done, what it's doing is it just renders up a cached version of the report. And so the pagination is really fast because we're not re-requesting anything. We're just using JavaScript to page through these things. But this is one example of a report. You know, when I look at this, I'm taking a look at each of the schools and how they did on number of properties, graphing systems, how they're doing overall. I can get into more specifics with graphs and charts and seeing how each school relates to each other, which school is doing the best, how are we comparing to the state average, how are we comparing to all these different numbers. So this is an example of a report the teachers are going to look at, that administrators are going to look at, principals will look at this type of report. Let me jump in and show you another one. Sorry, I know I'm going really fast. I just don't want to keep you here all day. I can talk for hours if you guys want me to. So I'm going to list reports. Another thing that we've done is all of the reports, we store all of this data that I'm pulling up right now. When I click on pre-built and search, I'm not loving my resolution here. These 193 reports, these are our pre-built reports. So there's 193 reports deployed in our demo site, and these are all Jasper reports. These are all reports that we've built in iReport and deployed. If I take a look for, what was I going to do? Comprehensive. So I've got this comprehensive KC student list. The KC test is the California High School Exit Exam. So I can look in 2013-14 and let's look for all students. This is looking across the whole entire district. What's interesting about this report is this one comes up really fast. And the reason why is because while I was rehearsing and going through my clicks, I pulled this report up. One of the things that we're doing is that we store a cached version of the report with every single one of these parameters. So as long as that XML payload that comes across matches something that was already generated, we'll just serve up that report again. If there's any difference, if anything has changed, then we'll regenerate the report. But this allows us to kind of intercept those requests ahead of time so that we can just keep serving up data as quickly as possible. This report here, this is just a list of all your kids, all the attempts that they've taken on this particular test. The red ones are the kids that are in 12th grade and still haven't passed the exit exam. So you might want to do something about it. And, there's drill downs. I can click into the student. This will take me into the student profile report that we have. So it's just access to the data that we need. If you look at this, if I'm an assessment coordinator at a school, what matters to me is find me all the kids that are 12th graders and they have not passed both ELA and math. I need to identify those kids, put them in some intervention, and make sure that I get them the support they need to pass the test. Let me see what other reports I wanted to show you guys. Okay, two more. CST percent proficient by grade level. So again, California standards test. Go back to my report list. So again, I can run this wherever I want. Let's go, and this is where I was talking about student groups. I want to find the kids that play basketball. I want to find the kids that are on the football team. These are those input controls that you can go really, really specific. There's a ton of different filters. Find me just the kids who are not proficient in English. Find me just the kids who are of this race or ethnicity. A lot of flexibility there. So test year 12-13, subject area will be math again. And let's run this report by grade level and test. I don't remember if I have to run this by district-wide. So there we go. So again, just some more data. Here's how you're doing. Here's how your second graders did on the second grade math test. Here's how your seventh graders did on the algebra test, your eighth graders on the algebra test. Just slicing and dicing the data in different ways based on the requests that we're getting. One other report I want to show you guys. And we'll almost shut up. Go reports list. This one is one of the less overwhelming but more exciting reports. You notice this one is referrals by location. This one was actually built by a school district. So one of the schools built this. So it's not the most gorgeous report ever, but this is a really good example of leveraging the power of the school districts and the folks that have that pretty good IT staff. They're connecting in, they're downloading iReport, they're hitting the database, and they come in and they just build these reports. So I'll go to my high school, and I want to find any kids with any discipline incidents. Just do a big date range. See what we get. So this is a discipline by location report. What this one should serve up, because it's going to tell me all the different locations on campus where these kids are getting in trouble the most. There we go. So it's classroom, 333 incidents in the classroom. But again, we didn't build this, and this is, I think, one of the most encouraging things for us, is that save and view results, I can save this as an assessment. And because of the way we structured the database and all that stuff, I can go right back into my overview, and then I can come into this district overview report, this site overview report, and these are all the same types of reports. So we're dynamically generating the data on the fly. I actually don't want to run this one. Let's go back to my overview and just do my teacher overview. And view in browser, see what we get. I just scanned 2 sheets, so it's not going to be all that good data. All right, so it didn't come up. But basically, this would then pull in all the results from my classroom. So as a classroom teacher, I can just do a real quick on-the-fly assessment, pull in all the data. The data structure is kind of built behind the scenes to load this stuff in dynamically. Using those input controls, just pulling all the data, you get instant feedback. So all of this stuff we're doing, obviously with our PHP development team, they're really, really good developers. But then on the reporting side, it's just all with Jaspersoft. Questions? Yeah. They were more responsive. I actually made some phone calls and talked to other clients that were the other customers of Jasper and got really good feedback there. And then we've been a customer for 4 years, and we keep renewing just because I think the support is what we need it to be. So yeah, you're right. We were evaluating a few different solutions. I think it was more the support and professional services. I think most importantly for us was the open source community. Because one of the really big things for us is because we've got a bunch of developers that they write PHP code, and our servers are Linux, and we use Postgres, and it's all open source. We're very accustomed to having a community that we can go out to and actually ask some questions of and get answers. And I don't want to have to wait around on picking up the phone. We want to find the answers for ourselves, and that's a huge piece of it. So I think the open source community support and then even the company support were two of the really big factors for us.
The Q&A up here, we'll do it next door where there are hors d'oeuvres and cocktails. Any of our services, including what comes with the subscription, which is the software license, the support, the training, which can be both live as well as online, and either live online or on your own pace online. Our professional services, our customer advisory services, as well as participation in our Jaspersoft product advisory board. So here's some contact information. You're welcome to talk to Dan or any of the rest of us next door about any of those topics, as well as with, I think, Mark, you're going to be able to stick around a little bit, and Bobak as well, I hope. Yep. Okay. So ask you just a couple of things. One is please fill out the evaluation forms, the surveys that you have in front of you, and hand those to any of the team on your way out. That's what qualifies you for the $50 Amazon gift card, which you can just turn around and spend on AWS if you want to, or you can buy yourself something on the rest of Amazon. Other than that, the drinks and hors d'oeuvres will be next door, so just go out the door, turn right again. It's literally in the room right next to us here. Katie, am I forgetting anything else? No. Okay. Thank you all very much for coming today. It was a pleasure.
Special events.
Hi.